Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. Right here in the live studios, tucked away on the coast of southeast England, overlooking the English Channel. We hope that all of you are safe and well and happy, and that your happiness is increasing as we move through the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur offered a very poetic and beautiful glorification of the Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. One day he was giving a lecture in a place called Munjer, and an earth tremor caused the Ganga, which was just next to where he was sitting, to come up, and there was a mild flooding, but then the water receded very quickly, after which Srila Bhakti Saraswati Thakur said this: in due course, Mahapralaya, devastating floods, will inundate the entire universe. If you attempt to survive by swimming in that deluge, then do not neglect to take hold of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. Or, if you cannot hold all three, then release Bhagavad Gita. If necessary, you may also relinquish Srimad Bhagavatam, but under no circumstances release your hold on Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. For if this one book remains, then the flood can do no actual damage, because after it has subsided, the message of Shastra can be revived from Sri Caitanya-caritämrta alone, it being the essence of all Shastra. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Jai Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. So, we're moving through the childhood pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the 14th chapter of the Ädi-lilä of Caitanya-caritämrta, and we reach the 94th verse. After some days, Jagannath Mishra inaugurated the primary education of his son by performing the Hati-kadi ceremony. Within a very few days, the Lord learned all the letters and combinations of letters. Purport: the 12 pala, or combinations of letters, are Ripa, Nana, Ma, Ya, Ra, La, Va, Ri, Li, and the long L. Hati-kadi, Vidyaramba, is a ceremony marking the beginning of primary education. When a boy is 4 or 5 years old, an auspicious day is chosen for this ceremony. After Vishnu is worshipped, the teacher gives the child a piece of chalk, and then, guiding the student's hand, instructs him how to write the letters of the alphabet, A, E, etc. by writing big letters on the floor. When the child is a little advanced in writing, he is given a slate for his primary education, which ends when he learns the two letter combinations, which are called pala, as described, as mentioned above. Text 95. This is a synopsis of the childhood pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, placed herewith in chronological order. Vrindavan Das Thakur has already elaborately explained these pastimes in his book Chaitanya Bhagavat. Text 96. I have therefore made only a brief summary. Being afraid of repetition, I have not elaborated on this subject matter. Sri Rupa Raghunatha Padi Yaraj, Caitanya-caritämrta Kahe Krishna Das. I didn't realize we only had 3 more verses to go. Otherwise I'd have finished yesterday. Anyway, praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri Caitanya-caritämrta, following in their footsteps. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Caitanya-caritämrta Ädi-lilä, 14th chapter, describing Lord Chaitanya's childhood pastime. Jai Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki Jai, Sri Nityananda Prabhu ki Jai, Jagannath Mishra ki Jai, Shakti Mata ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol, Navadvip Dham ki Jai. All right. We just turned another an act in the grand play of the pastimes in the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All right, chapter 15, the Lord's Poganda Lila. A synopsis of the 15th chapter is as follows. The Lord took lessons in grammar from Gangadas Pandit and became very expert in commenting upon grammar. He forbade his mother to take grains on the Ekadashi day. He narrated a story that Vishwarup, after accepting the sannyas order, invited him in a dream to accept sannyas also, but that the Lord refused and was therefore sent back home. When Jagannath Mishra passed away, the Lord married the daughter of Ballabhacharya, whose name was Lakshmi. All these events are summarized in this chapter. Text 1. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya, because simply by offering a flower at his lotus feet, even the most ardent materialist becomes a devotee. Text 2. All glories to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all glories to Lord Nityananda Prabhu, all glories to Advaita Acharya, and all glories to all the devotees of Lord Chaitanya. Text 3. Let me now enumerate the activities of the Lord between the ages of 5 and 10. His chief occupation during this period was to engage himself in study. Text 4. The pastimes of the Lord during his Poganda age were very extensive. His education was his chief occupation, and after that, his very beautiful marriage took place. Text 5. When the Lord was studying grammar at the place of Gangadas Pandit, he would immediately learn grammatical rules and definitions by heart, simply by hearing them once. Purport. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that the Lord was given lessons by a teacher named Vishnu and another teacher named Sudarshana. Later on, when he was a little grown up, he was under the care of Gangadas Pandit, who taught him grammar of a higher standard. Anyone serious about studying the Sanskrit language should first learn grammar. It is said that simply to finish studying Sanskrit grammar takes at least 12 years. But once one learns the grammatical rules and regulations very nicely, all other scriptures or subject matters in Sanskrit are extremely easy to understand. For Sanskrit grammar is the gateway to education. Text 6. He soon became so expert on commenting on the Panjitika that he could win victory over all the other students, although he was a neophyte. Purport. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says there was a commentary on grammar named Panjitika that was later explained very lucidly by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 7. In his book Chaitanya Mangala, which later became Chaitanya Bhagavat, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur has very elaborately described the Lord's pastimes of study. Purport. The Chaitanya Bhagavat Adikanda, chapters 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are a good reference for the studious pastimes of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 8. One day, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fell down at the feet of his mother and requested her to give him one thing in charity. Text 9. His mother replied, "My dear son, I will give you whatever you ask." Then the Lord said, "My dear mother, please do not eat grains on the Ekadashi day." Purport. From the very beginning of his childhood life, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced the system of observing the fast on the Ekadashi day. In the Bhakti Sandarbha by Srila Jiva Goswami, there is a quotation from the Skanda Purana admonishing that a person who eats grains on Ekadashi becomes a murderer of his mother, father, brother, and spiritual master, and that even if he is elevated to a Vaikuntha planet, he falls down. On Ekadashi, everything is cooked for Vishnu, including regular grains and dal, but it is enjoined that a Vaishnava should not even take Vishnu Prasadam on Ekadashi. It is said that a Vaishnava does not accept anything eatable that is not offered to Lord Vishnu, but on Ekadashi, a Vaishnava should not touch even Mahaprasadam offered to Vishnu, although such prasadam may be kept for eating the next day. It is strictly forbidden for one to accept any kind of grain on Ekadashi, even if it is offered to Lord Vishnu. Text 10. Mother Shachi said, "You have spoken very nicely. I shall not eat grains on Ekadashi." From that day, she began to observe fasting on Ekadashi. Purport. It is a prejudice among Smarta Brahmanas that a widow must observe fasting on Ekadashi, but a woman who is sadhava, who has her husband, should not. It appears that before Lord Chaitanya's request, Shachi Mata, being sadhava, was not observing Ekadashi. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, however, introduced the system that a woman, even if not a widow, must observe the Ekadashi day and must not touch any grains, any kind of grains, even those offered to the deity of Vishnu. Text 11. Thereafter, seeing that Vishwarupa was a grown-up youth, Jagannath Mishra wanted to find a girl and arrange a marriage ceremony for him. Text 12. Hearing of this, Vishvarupa immediately left home and went away to accept sannyas and travel from one place of pilgrimage to another. 13. When Chachimata and Jagannath Mishra heard of the departure of their elder son, Vishvarupa, they were very unhappy, but Lord Chaitanya tried to console them. Text 14. My dear father and mother, my dear mother and father, the Lord said, it is very good that Vishvarupa has accepted the sannyas order, for thus he has delivered both his father's family and his mother's family. Purport. It is sometimes said that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu disapproved of the acceptance of the sannyas order in this Kali Yuga, because in the Shastra it is said, Ashramedam Gavalambam Sannyasam Palapaitrikam Devarena Sutotpatim Kalau Panchavivarjayet. In this age of Kali, 5 acts are forbidden: the offering of a horse in sacrifice, the offering of a cow in sacrifice, the acceptance of the order of sannyas, the offering of oblations of flesh to the forefathers, and a man's begetting children in his brother's wife. Brahma Vaivarta Purana, Krishna Janma Kanda, 185, 180. Nevertheless, we see that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself accepted sannyas and approved of the sannyas of his elder brother, Vishvarupa. It is clearly said here, Balahoila Vishvarupa sannyasa kalila pritikula matrikula dvi udarila. Therefore should it be thought that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made statements that are contradictory? No, actually he did not. It is recommended that one take sannyas to dedicate his life for the service of the Lord. Then everyone must take that kind of sannyas. For by accepting such sannyas, one renders the best service to both his parental and maternal families. But one should not accept the sannyas order of the Mayavad school, which has practically no meaning. We find many Mayavadi sannyasis simply loitering in the street, thinking themselves Brahman or Narayana, and spending all day and night begging so they can fill their hungry bellies. Mayavadi sannyasis have become so degraded that there is a section of them who eat everything, just like hogs and dogs. It is such degraded sannyas that is prohibited in this age. Actually, Srila Shankaracharya's principles for the acceptance of sannyas were very strict, but later the so-called Mayavadi sannyasis became degraded because of their false philosophy, which propounds that by accepting sannyas one becomes Narayana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu rejected that kind of sannyas, but the acceptance of sannyas is one of the items of the Varnashram Dharma. How then can it be rejected? Text 15. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu assured his parents that he would serve them, and thus the minds of his father and mother were satisfied. Text 16. One day Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ate betel nuts offered to the deity, but they acted as an intoxicant, and he fell down on the ground unconscious. Purport. Betel nuts are an intoxicant, and therefore the regulative principles prohibit eating them. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes of fainting after eating betel nuts is a solid instruction to all of us that one should not touch betel nuts, even those offered to Vishnu, just as one should not touch grains on the Ekadashi day. Of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's fainting had a particular purpose. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can do whatever he likes and eat whatever he wants, but we should not imitate his pastimes. Text 17. After his father and mother sprinkled water on his mouth with great haste, the Lord revived and said something wonderful they had never heard before. Text 18. The Lord said, Vishwarupa took me away from here, and he requested me to accept the sannyas order. 19. I replied to Vishwarupa, I have my helpless father and mother, and also I am but a child. What do I know about the sannyas order of life? Text 20. Later, I shall become a householder, and thus serve my parents, for this action will very much satisfy Lord Narayana and his wife, the goddess of fortune. Text 21. Then Vishwarupa returned me home and requested, offer thousands and thousands of obeisances unto my mother Shachi Devi. Text 22. In this way Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu performed various pastimes, but why he did so, I cannot understand. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees who come to this world are executing a mission, and therefore sometimes they act in a way that is very difficult to understand. It is said, therefore, Vaishnaveda Kriya Mudra Bhigyeha Na Bhujaya. Even if one is a very learned and intelligent scholar, he cannot understand the activities of a Vaishnava. A Vaishnava accepts anything favorable for executing his mission, but foolish persons, not knowing the purpose of such exalted Vaishnavas, indulge in criticizing them. That is forbidden. Since no one can understand what a Vaishnava does for the purpose of executing his mission, to criticize such a Vaishnava is the offense called sadhu ninda. Text 23. After some days, Jagannath Mishra passed away from this world to the transcendental world, and both mother and son were very much aggrieved in their hearts. 24. Friends and relatives came there to pacify Lord Chaitanya and his mother. Then Lord Chaitanya, even though he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, executed the rituals for his dead father according to the Vedic system. Text 25. After some days the Lord thought, I did not take sannyas, and since I am remaining at home, it is my duty to act as a grihastha. 26. Without a wife, Lord Chaitanya considered, there is no meaning to householder life. Thus the Lord decided to marry. Text 27. Merely a house is not a home, for it is a wife who gives a home its meaning. If one lives at home with his wife, together they can fulfill all the interests of human life. Text 28. One day when the Lord was coming back from school, he accidentally saw the daughter of Vallabhacharya on the way to the Ganges. 29. When the Lord and Lakshmi Devi met, their relationship awakened, having already been settled, and coincidentally, the marriage maker Vanamali came to see Shachimata. Purport. Vanamali Gataka. Vanamali Gataka, a resident of Navadvip and a Brahmana by caste, arranged the marriage of the Lord to Lakshmi Devi. He was formerly Vishwamrita, who negotiated the marriage of Lord Ramachandra, and later he was the Brahmana who negotiated the marriage of Lord Krishna with Rukmini. That same Brahmana acted as the marriage maker of the Lord in Caitanya-lilä. Text 30. Following the indications of Shachi Devi, Vanamali Gataka arranged the marriage, and thus in due course the Lord married Lakshmi Devi. Text 31. Vrindavan Das Thakur has elaborately described all these pastimes of the Lord's early age. What I have given is but a condensed presentation of the same pastimes. Text 32. The Lord performed many varieties of pastimes in his early age, and Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur has described them elaborately. 33. I have given but a single hint of these pastimes, for Vrindavan Das Thakur, in his book Chaitanya Mangal, now Chaitanya Bhagavat, has described them all vividly. 34. Sri Rupa Raghunatha Padayara Aj, Caitanya-caritämrta, Kahi Krishna Das. Praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri Caitanya-caritämrta, following in their footsteps. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Caitanya-caritämrta Ädi-lilä, 15th chapter, describing the Lord's Poganda Lila. Jai! Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Vishwa Rupa ki jai, Jagannath Mishra ki jai, Sachi Mati ki jai, Lakshmi Devi ki jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, the Lord's Poganda Lila ki jai. That was quick. Only 34 verses. So this is an important point that especially in the first 24 years of Lord Chaitanya's life, the Caitanya-caritämrta gives just a synopsis. Vrindavan Das Thakur gives them elaborately. So we advise everyone to read the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Okay, chapter 16. The pastimes of the Lord between his childhood and youth. This chapter fully describes Lord Chaitanya's Kaishora-lila, or the activities he performed just before attaining youth. During this time, he studied deeply and was victorious over greatly learned scholars. During his Kaishora-lila, the Lord also sported in the water. He went to East Bengal to secure financial assistance, cultivate knowledge, and introduce the Sankirtan movement, and there he met Tapan Mishra, whom he instructed about spiritual advancement and ordered to go to Varanasi. While Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was touring East Bengal, his wife, Lakshmi Devi, was bitten by a serpent, or by the serpent of separation, and thus she left this world. When the Lord returned home, he saw that his mother was overwhelmed with grief because of Lakshmi Devi's death. Therefore, at her request, he later married his second wife, Vishnu Priya Devi. This chapter also describes the Lord's argument with Keshava Kashmiri, the celebrated scholar, and the Lord's criticism of his prayer glorifying Mother Ganges. In this prayer, the Lord found 5 kinds of literary ornaments and 5 kinds of literary faults, thus defeating the Pandit. Later, the Kashmiri Pandit, who was known to have been victorious over all over the country, submitted himself to the goddess of learning, and by her order, he met Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the morning of the next day and surrendered unto him. Text 1. I worship Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose nectarian mercy flows like a great river, inundating the entire universe. Just as a river flows downstream, Lord Chaitanya especially extends himself to the fallen. Can I repeat that? You wouldn't mind? Okay. I worship Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose nectarian mercy flows like a great river, inundating the entire universe. Just as a river flows downstream, Lord Chaitanya especially extends himself to the fallen. Purport. Narottam Das Thakur. Narottam Das Thakur is sung. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Dwaya Kadamore. He prays for Lord Chaitanya's mercy, because he is the mercy incarnation, having appeared especially to reclaim the fallen souls. The more fallen one is, the greater one's claim to the favor of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One must only be very sincere and serious. Despite being contaminated by all the bad qualities of this Kali Yuga, if one surrenders unto the lotus feet of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord will surely and certainly deliver him. The best example is Jagai and Madhai. In this age of Kali, practically everyone is like Jagai and Madhai, but the Sankirtan movement inaugurated by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is still flowing like a great river, inundating the entire world, and thus the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is successfully claiming all fallen souls to free them from contamination. Text 2. All glories to Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all glories to Lord Nityananda, all glories to Advaita Chandra, and all glories to all the devotees of the Lord. Text 3. Long live Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Kaishora age. Both the goddess of fortune and the goddess of learning worshipped him. The goddess of learning, Saraswati, worshipping him in his victory over the scholar, who had conquered all the world, and the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi Devi, worshipped him at home. Since he is therefore the husband of, or lord of both goddesses, I offer my obeisances unto him. Text 4. At the age of 11, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to teach students. This marks the beginning of his Kaishora age. Text 5. As soon as the Lord became a teacher, many students came to him, every one of them astonished to hear his mode of explanation. Text 6. The Lord defeated all kinds of scholars in discourses about all the scriptures, yet because of his gentle behavior, none of them were unhappy. Text 7. The Lord, as a teacher, performed various kinds of pranks in his sporting pastimes in the water of the Ganges. Text 8. After some days, the Lord went to East Bengal, and wherever he went, he introduced the Sankirtan movement. Although Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees in disciplic succession can defeat all kinds of learned scholars, scientists, and philosophers in arguments, thus establishing the supremacy of this personality of Godhead, their main business as preachers is to introduce Sankirtan everywhere. Simply to defeat scholars and philosophers is not the occupation of a preacher. Preachers must simultaneously introduce the Sankirtan movement, for that is the mission of the Chaitanya cult. Text 9. Struck with wonder at the influence of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's intellectual prowess, many hundreds of students came to the Lord and began studying under his direction. Text 10. In East Bengal, there was a Brahmana named Tapan Mishra who could not ascertain the objective of life or how to attain it. Purport. One must first ascertain the object of life and then understand how to attain it. The Krishna consciousness movement is pointing out to everyone that the object of life is to understand Krishna, and to attain that goal of life, one must practice Krishna consciousness, following the methods prescribed by the Goswamis with reference to the authoritative Shastras and Vedas. Text 11. If one becomes a bookworm, reading many books and scriptures and hearing many commentaries and the instructions of many men, this will produce doubt within his heart. One cannot in this way ascertain the real goal of life. Purport. In Srimad Bhagavatam 7.13.8, it is said, Grantan naivabhyased bahun na vyakyam upayunjita. One should not read many books, nor should one try to make a profession of reciting many books, especially if one is a devotee. One must give up the ambition to be a learned scholar, and in this way earn a worldly reputation and financial facilities. If one diverts his attention to studying many books, he cannot fix his mind in devotional service, nor can he understand many scriptures, for they are full of grave statements and meanings. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives his opinion that those who are attracted to studying many kinds of literature, considering various subject matters, especially fruitive activities and philosophical speculation, are deprived of unalloyed devotional service because of their splayed attention. Man has a general tendency toward fruitive activities, religious ritualistic ceremonies, and philosophical speculation. A living entity thus bewildered since time immemorial does not understand the real goal of life, and thus his activities in life are wasted. Innocent persons, misled in this way, are deprived of unalloyed Krishna Bhakti, devotional service to the Lord. Tapan Mishra is a vivid example of such a person. He was a learned scholar, but he could not ascertain what the goal of life is. Therefore, he was given a chance to hear Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructing Sanatana Goswami. Lord Chaitanya's instruction to Tapan Mishra is especially significant for persons who loiter here and there, collecting books and reading none of them, thus becoming bewildered regarding the aim of life. Let me read this again. It's very important, this. Lord Chaitanya's instruction to Tapan Mishra is especially significant for persons who loiter here and there, collecting books and reading none of them, thus becoming bewildered regarding the aim of life. I heard Gopi Pranadana Prabhu give a lecture once on this subject, and he described that what is meant here, what the Goswamis meant, and what Lord Chaitanya is saying here, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, is not to become a dilettante. A dilettante is a French word that means a person who reads a little in one book and then puts it down, and reads another book a little and puts it down, and another book and puts it down, and so on and so forth, and memorizes a little bit of a lot of books, but really doesn't understand deeply any of them. He is called dilettante. And this is the kind of person that Rupa Goswami says we should avoid being. Rather, we should read one book, or two books, or three books, and study them thoroughly, understand them deeply, and apply their principles into our own lives, and therefore reform our character. That's the difference between the dilettante and the actual devotee, learned devotee. Text 12. Tapan Mishra, being thus bewildered, was directed by a Brahmana in a dream to go to Nimai Pandit, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One last thing about this other subject. In the beginning of the Bhagavatam, it is said, when Sutta Goswami, when Shaunaka was asking questions of Sutta Goswami. He said, in all the scriptures there are many topics, and there are many scriptures, and sometimes their subject matters seem to be contradictory, and therefore, please describe to us the essence of them. And then he recited the Srimad Bhagavatam. So in the same spirit, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and of course, Gita and Caitanya-caritämrta, they are to be learned thoroughly, and then one becomes a real devotee. But if one tries to learn all the Vedas, and all the Upanishads, and all the Puranas, and all the histories, and all these things, then the chances of him becoming dilettante are very great. Text 13. Well, text 12 again. Tapan Mishra, being thus bewildered, was directed by a Brahmana in a dream to go to Nimai Pandit, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 13. Because he is the Lord, Ishvara, the Brahmana told him, undoubtedly he can give you proper direction. Text 14. After seeing the dream, Tapan Mishra came to the shelter of Lord Chaitanya's lotus feet, and he described all the details of the dream to the Lord. Text 15. The Lord, being satisfied, instructed him about the object of life and the process for attaining it. He instructed him that the basic principle of success is to chant the holy name of the Lord, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Purport. The Krishna consciousness movement is based upon this instruction of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that one must chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra regularly and according to the prescribed principles. We simply ask our Western students to chant at least 16 rounds a day, but sometimes we find that they fail to chant even these 16 rounds, and instead they bring many austere books and a worshipping method that diverts their attention in so many ways. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's cult is based upon the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. Lord Chaitanya first advised Tapan Mishra to fix his mind on this chanting. We, the members of the Krishna consciousness movement, must strictly follow this advice of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And please notice that here Prabhupada in his purport is stressing the chanting of our rounds, 16 rounds a day minimum. He doesn't talk about, in this particular context, the congregational chanting as being the spreading of the Krishna consciousness movement. And then if you think about it, the only vow that we take when we take our initiation from our spiritual master is to chant the prescribed number of rounds a day, every day, without fail, and to follow the regulator principles, avoiding the four pillars of sinful life: meat eating, gambling, intoxication, and illicit sex. It is very interesting. It means that the stress in our personal spiritual lives should be on the quality of our japa. Text 16. Tapan Mishra desired to live with the Lord in Navadvip, but the Lord asked him to go to Varanasi, Benares. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't chant congregationally the holy name and promote it by going out and chanting in public and chanting in front of the deity and so on and so forth, and having programs. Text 17. The Lord reassured Tapan Mishra that they would meet again in Varanasi. Receiving this order, Tapan Mishra went there. Text 18. I cannot understand the inconceivable pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. For although Tapan Mishra wanted to live with him in Navadvip, the Lord advised him to go to Varanasi. Purport. When Tapan Mishra met him, Lord Chaitanya was living in household life, and there was no indication that in the future he would accept the sannyas order. But by asking Tapan Mishra to go to Varanasi, he indicated that in the future he would accept sannyas, and that when he would teach Sanatana Goswami, Tapan Mishra would take advantage of the opportunity to learn the object of life and the real process for attaining it. Text 19. In this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu contributed the greatest benefit to the people of East Bengal by initiating them into Harinama, the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and making them learned scholars by educating them. Purport. Following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Krishna consciousness movement is distributing the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and inducing people all over the world to chant. We are giving people an immense treasury of transcendental literature, translated into all the important languages of the world. And by the grace of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this literature is selling profusely, and people are chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra with great delight. This is the preaching process of the Chaitanya cult. Since the Lord wanted this cult preached all over the world, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is acting in a humble way so that the vision of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may be fulfilled all over the world, especially in the Western countries. Text 20. Because the Lord was engaged in various ways in preaching work in East Bengal, his wife Lakshmi Devi was very unhappy at home in separation from her husband. Text 21. The snake of separation bit Lakshmi Devi, and its poison caused her death. Thus she passed to the next world. She went back home, back to Godhead. Purport. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 8.6, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajajante kalevaram. One's practice in thinking throughout his entire life determines the quality of his thoughts at death, and thus at death one obtains a suitable body. According to this principle, Lakshmi Devi, the goddess of fortune from Vaikuntha, who was absorbed in thought of the Lord and separation from him, certainly went back home to Vaikuntha after death. Text 22. Lord Chaitanya knew about the disappearance of Lakshmi Devi because he is the Supersoul himself. Thus he returned home to solace his mother, Sachi Devi, who was greatly unhappy about the death of her daughter-in-law. Text 23. When the Lord returned home, bringing with him great wealth and many followers, he spoke to Sachi Devi about transcendental knowledge to relieve her of the grief she was suffering. Purport. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita 2.13, Dehi no sminyata dehe komadam yomanam jada tatadi hantara praptir didas tatra namuyati. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Such verses from the Bhagavad Gita or any other Vedic literature give valuable instructions on the occasion of someone's passing away. By discussing such instructions from the Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, a sober man can certainly understand that the soul never dies, but rather passes from one body to another. This is called transmigration of the soul. A soul comes into this material world and creates bodily relationships with a father, a mother, sisters, brothers, a wife, and children. But all these relationships pertain to the body, not the soul. Therefore, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, Dhiras tatra namuyati, one who is sober is not disturbed by such phenomenal changes within this material world. Such instructions are called tattvakatha, or real truth. Text 24. After coming back from East Bengal, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu again began educating others. By the strength of his education, he conquered everyone, and thus he was greatly proud. Text 25. Then Lord Chaitanya married Vishnupriya, the goddess of fortune, and thereafter he conquered a champion of learning named Caitanya-caritämrta. Purport. As in the modern day, there are many champions in sports, so in bygone days there were many learned scholars in India who were champions in learning. One such person was Caitanya-caritämrta, who came from the state of Kashmir. He traveled all over India and at last came to Navadvip to challenge the learned scholars there. Unfortunately, he could not conquer the learned scholars in Navadvip, for he was defeated by the boy scholar, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Later he understood that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus he surrendered unto him and later became a pure Vaishnava in the Sampradaya of Nimbarka. He wrote Kaustubha Prabha, a commentary on the Vedanta commentary of the Nimbarka Sampradaya, which is known as Parijata Bhashya. The Bhakti Ratnakara mentions Caitanya-caritämrta and lists his predecessors in the disciplic succession of the Nimbarka Sampradaya. 1. Srinivasa Acharya. 2. Vishwa Acharya. 2. 3. Purushottam. 4. Vilas. 5. Sarupa. 6. Madhava. 7. Balabhadra. 8. Padma. 9. Shama. 10. Gopal. 11. Kripa. 12. Deva Acharya. 13. Sundara Bhatta. 14. Padmanabha. 15. Upendra. 16. Ramachandra. 17. Vamana. 18. Krishna. 19. Padmakara. 20. Shravana. 21. Buri. 22. Madhava. 23. Shama. 24. Gopal. 25. Balabhadra. 26. Gopinath. 27. Keshava. 28. Gokula. And 29. Caitanya-caritämrta. It is stated in the Bhakti Ratnakara that Caitanya-caritämrta was a favorite devotee of Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning. By her grace, he was an extremely influential scholar, and he was the greatest champion among all the scholars in the four corners of the country. Therefore he got the title Digvijayi, which means one who has conquered everyone in all directions. He belonged to a very respectable Brahmana family of Kashmir. Later, by the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he gave up the profession of winning championships and became a great devotee. He joined the Nimbarka Sampradaya, one of the Vaishnava communities of the Vedic culture. Vrindavan Das Thakur has previously elaborately described this. That which is clear need not be scrutinized for good qualities and faults. So we're going to stop here, our reading tonight. It's almost an hour of reading. And ask everyone out there in cyberspace if there's anything that particularly touched their hearts or stuck in their minds, they want to discuss further or elaborate upon or whatever. Please be our guests.
Something from Gopal Roy and Bhakta Ellis.
Hey, Gopal Roy and Bhakta? Ellis. Hare Krishna.
Dear Maharaj, can you please explain more about Lord Chaitanya extending himself to the most fallen? What is it about a fallen state that attracts Lord Chaitanya's mercy?
The biggest obstacle in devotional life or spiritual life is pride. When a person becomes proud, he first of all becomes complacent about his spiritual life and generally concentrates his energy on acquiring things, acquiring wealth, acquiring prestige, acquiring followers, aristocratic followers, creating a dynasty, and all these things. Therefore, in Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 13th chapter, he lists, I think, 18 items or so of what is knowledge. And the first one is humility, and the second is pridelessness. So the thing is, when you're proud, the sound of the scripture, the sound of the teachings, cannot go through the mind and intelligence. They get caught there, and the mind and intelligence like to play with them, speculate. And therefore, the sound doesn't go through to the soul. It doesn't wake up, doesn't have the proper effect. Therefore, in the purport to that verse, Srila Prabhupada makes the statement that knowledge begins with humility. So humility comes naturally to a person who is seemingly fallen materially. He's not so adored. He doesn't have so many things. And therefore that person becomes a proper candidate. And another aspect of that is helplessness. The more material facility a person has, the more learned he is, the more he's surrounded by followers and popularity and wealth and positions and adoration in society, then he becomes more proud. One thing leads to another, and he can't be told, can't hear. So therefore it says that Lord Chaitanya's mercy naturally flows to the most fallen, meaning people who are feeling helpless. Of course, sometimes people can be very fallen in another way, and they can take birth in a big family and therefore later become degraded, because that's another aspect of becoming in an elevated family. The tendency to become degraded into sensual activities also is very strong. The Jagai and Madai, which were mentioned in the chapter are the symbols of this tendency. They were born in a Brahmin family. They were in good social standing, but they fell down. They became woman hunters and debauchees and thieves and rogues of all description. So Lord Chaitanya's mission is to deliver such persons, because in Kali Yuga, practically everyone's like that, whatever their position in society. You know, the 4 pillars of sinful life, you know, the lifestyles, the persons become famous, they become expert at sports or drama or, you know, movies, politics. So Lord Chaitanya is looking for the persons who are actually humble and sincere and serious. Therefore, His mercy flows naturally down to those who are feeling helpless, who have no other shelter. Hare Krishna.
Comment from Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna, Gopakanya.
She says, Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to your loving daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books and His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, the Savior of the fallen souls.
Hare
of this
Krishna,
Kali
Hare
Yuga.
Bol. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Blessings of the Vaishnavas. Very powerful.
And Bhakta Ellis says, what an answer.
Huh?
He says, what an answer.
Well, thanks. Just a simple, pretty simple. Simple is best. Prabhupada said another way of saying that this is simple for the simple. One's mind simple, humble, it's easy to hear and change the heart. What else? Okay, everybody's pretty much satisfied. Hare Krishna. We went through, 2 short chapters. We got a hint that it would be a good idea to read the Chaitanya Bhagavat to find out the details, pastimes of his beginning of his life.
Something from Sudevi Dasi.
Hare Krishna, Sudevi.
She says, please accept my humble obeisances, Maharaj. I am here each day and realize my mistakes. Example, having read a bit here and there. But now I have you who reads each day, and I fall on a matter of I can focus totally or not. I thank you so much for saving me.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much. It is a very important point, that the tendency to collect a whole bunch of books and not read any of them, but everybody being impressed when they come into your room. I've got a room in Govardhan that's full of books, and of course I've read quite a few of them, but there's many books more than I can read. But I ended up just concentrating more on the Gita and the Bhagavatam and Caitanya-caritämrta. That's all I read. So I learned that lesson, the hard way. Anyway, there's a library there for research. When I was editing books, I used to use the books a lot for research, checking things. But Prabhupada said, if you just stick to one book, the Bhagavad Gita, and learn it really thoroughly, then you will benefit and everyone else will benefit from that teaching, because that's what most people need to hear the most, the basics of Krishna consciousness. Because from the basics, the foundation, then we can grow our house of bhakti. And the deeper we dig the foundation, the higher we can grow. Just like in a building. If you want to build a big, tall skyscraper, you have to have a very deep and solid and strong foundation. Sometimes modern day, architects and constructors, they take shortcuts in the quality of the ingredients or the place or whatever, and the buildings fall down and it's a disaster and people are killed. So that's a lesson to us. We want to grow our house of bhakti, build our house of bhakti. We have to, dig our foundation deep. Okay, thank you so much, everybody.
Something from Rati Manjari.
Rati, Haribo, I wondered where you were. You were writing all the questions.
She says, Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna, Rati Manjari.
You just explained how by taking birth in a high family, there is a chance to become degraded also. In our study group, there was one devotee who said she was always wondering why when one does not make it in Krishna consciousness, what is one of the benefits that one can take birth in a high family if there is a chance to become degraded? How is that a blessing then?
It's a blessing, and it can be a blessing because the person doesn't have to struggle so much to maintain oneself. That's the blessing. But there's the danger also. Because in the Bhagavad Gita it talks about two things. It talks about birth in a rich mercantile family, and in those days the rich mercantile families were very pious, very religious. And nowadays the nouveau riche, they tend to be just the opposite. So it isn't necessarily, a benefit to be born in a rich family if the family is degraded. There's a difference now. In India you'll see it more than in the West, but there's called old wealth, that comes from properties having been, passed down from generation after generation after generation, and the wealth they have is different, than just building up a big business and putting money in the bank, So that kind of wealth comes from especially pious background. And so those persons have a tendency to be religious. They have a tendency to have deity worship in their homes elaborately, and the persons who are born there get a chance to get good habits in the beginning. And the other class of man is the learned devotees, the pious brahmanas and great souls, great Vaishnava families. That's a very rare birth. Is that clear? Okay, this time I'm going. because I have the Zoom meeting tomorrow, and I've got things to do. So I thank all of you very much for your wonderful reflections and questions, and I'll see you tomorrow night. Shri Caitanya-caritämrta ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. See you tomorrow night, same place, same station, right here in the live studios in the Haven, Hive, Kent. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.